Let's welcome our next guest who just recently passed the CPA exam.
Hi guys, my name is John Eichelberger. I work at Onisco and Shoals in Long Beach, and I'm part of the CalCPA YEP Comittee. Today I'm going to be sharing with you tips and a little bit about how I passed the CPA exam.
How did you study for the CPA exam in general?
Overall, coming up with a strategy to pass the CPA exam, that was the most important part. It's a 4-part test, and each one takes about 6 to maybe 12 weeks of study depending on how you want to split up the hours. But my plan was to take FAR, which is the hardest one, and then BEC, which is maybe, for me it was tough, so I did those two first, and after that I took audit and reg. But for each test I probably studied the most for FAR, and I had to really plan out my timing schedule. So FAR I did about 3 months of study, and then BEC was closer to 2.5 months, and audit and reg were about 2 to 2.5 months as well. So I had to really just lay down a timeline. Putting down a timeline and then committing to hours that you want to study is the most important part.
How do you study for multiple choice questions?
So multiple choice, the way that I went about studying was I wanted to focus more on what I didn't know. So I would read the whole book first, and I studied using Becker, so shout out to Becker. And I read the whole book first, and then I would go through and do all the multiple choice questions just to kind of reinforce what I was learning. And I didn't spend any time on simulations, maybe 5% if I really needed it. But as I went through multiple choice, if I got an 80% to an 85%, I felt pretty comfortable moving on and going to the next section. And it took a lot of time just to kind of reread if I didn't understand, or to make sure that I solidified my knowledge, and I would go back and rework multiple choice if I had to.
How do you study for simulation questions?
Simulations, actually, they went all right during the exam. I think those were the parts that I scored the lowest. However, knowing enough about the multiple choice, I was able to kind of work my way through just using my knowledge that I had and work through the simulations. I also had work experience, so there's a lot of memos, a lot of documents you have to sort through when you do a simulation question. And having the work experience is really what drove me to understand how to really focus on what I needed and throw away the stuff I didn't need when it came to getting through the simulations efficiently, and knowing what I should just, if I didn't know, just go on to the next thing and kind of use my time the best that I could to get to the end of the exam.
How do you take study notes?
My way of taking notes is I will write the notes down, however, I never go back and reread them. And some people are completely different, but I just write chicken scratch, and I don't really care about reading it in like the next week, the next month, whatever. I do it once till I understand it, and then I move on to the next thing. And I brought with me today, just to show you, I take notes on computer paper. There's no notes on this, but what I'll do is I'll make like a knowledge tree, or maybe like a pyramid, to kind of understand the concepts, how things are linked. And that's like my method of taking notes. Once I understand it, then I kind of just move on to the next thing. And if I need to reread something, I will, or if I need to just kind of redo the notes to understand it, I will, but I never look back on my notes. That's my way of studying. So, I mean, the most important thing is finding your own study style, but for me personally, that was what works.
Which material did you study first for the CPA exam?
So I didn't use note cards. I used textbook first. As I read my textbook, I would keep a piece of paper, so I would read, write down some notes that I had, and then after that, I would go on, do the multiple choice. It didn't matter what I scored on the multiple choice. I would go on to the next section, read, then do the notes, and then go on just like rinse, repeat, until the very end. Like after I'd got through the book, I'd find my weak points, and those were the ones that I'd go and just like dig down deeper before the test.
What was the most difficult section for you?
I would say it was either FAR or BEC. it was the first two that I got out of the way. FAR has the most meat in it. It's gonna take the most time to study. BEC, I was never good with internal controls or the COSO, and even cost accounting. It was a little bit harder for me to grasp in the beginning, but I just really had to just spend a lot of time learning that in order to get it right.
How long did it take you to finish the CPA exam?
With taking all 4 sections, it took me 1 year from the first date I took my first test to the last date I took my last test. So I took my first test September 6th, 2018, and that was FAR. So I studied the most time leading up to FAR, on and off for about a year, but then like really 3 months, was like hardcore, just me studying right before that test. And then the next test that I took was BEC, and that was in November of 2018, so another couple months after that. And then I took, I want to say audit next. Audit I took in May of 2019, and then my last test was, what are these, 4 of them? Regulation. So I took regulation on September 7th of 2019.